Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and for one single day, nothing anyone says about you has the power to disturb your peace. Someone criticizes your work, you listen calmly. Someone ignores your message, you continue smiling. Someone receives the promotion you hoped for. Instead of resentment, you genuinely wish them well. Someone misunderstands your intentions. You no longer feel an overwhelming need to defend yourself. Now ask yourself one question. Who would you become if your ego stopped demanding that the world constantly prove your worth? For most people, the answer is difficult, because many of us have mistaken the voice of our ego for the voice of our true self. We believe that every insult must be answered, every disagreement must be won, every criticism must be explained, every success must be noticed, every achievement must be admired. Without realizing it, we spend years serving something that never feels satisfied, the ego. It is one of the quietest prisons in the world. Its walls cannot be seen, its chains make no sound, yet millions carry them every day. Imagine a man carrying a large mirror everywhere he goes. He doesn't use it to see his reflection. Instead, he constantly turns it toward other people. Every compliment becomes proof that he matters. Every criticism becomes proof that he is failing. Every glance, every opinion, every conversation becomes another verdict about his value. Eventually, he forgets how to see himself without asking someone else to define him. Many people live exactly this way. The ego survives on comparison. It whispers, "Be better than them. Prove yourself. Don't let anyone disrespect you. Show everyone what you're worth." At first, these thoughts may sound like confidence, but confidence and ego are not the same. Confidence is quiet, ego is loud. Confidence doesn't need applause. Ego cannot survive without it. Confidence grows from character. Ego grows from comparison. One creates peace, the other creates endless conflict. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than almost anyone. Imagine ruling one of the greatest empires in history, commanding armies, leading millions of people, holding extraordinary power. Most rulers would become consumed by pride. Yet Marcus wrote private reminders to himself that no one else was meant to read. He reminded himself that fame fades, power disappears, praise is temporary. Even emperors eventually become forgotten. Why would the most powerful man in the world spend so much time reminding himself of his own humility? Because he knew the greatest battle was never against his enemies. It was against his own ego. There is an old story about a king who commissioned two magnificent crowns. One was made entirely of gold and precious jewels. The other appeared plain and simple. When visitors arrived, they always admired the golden crown. The king smiled but never wore it. Instead, every morning he quietly placed the simple crown upon his head. One day, a young prince finally asked, "Why don't you wear the beautiful one?" The old king replied, "The jeweled crown reminds everyone that I am a king. The plain crown reminds me that I am still a human being. That is wisdom." The ego constantly asks, "How can I appear greater?" Wisdom asks, "How can I become better?" Those two questions create entirely different lives. Modern psychology tells us that the human brain naturally protects our self-image. When someone criticizes us, the brain often reacts as though we are facing a physical threat. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense, we become defensive, we interrupt, we explain, we argue, not because every criticism is true, but because the ego mistakes disagreement for danger. Imagine standing before a calm lake. When the water is perfectly still, it reflects the mountains with remarkable clarity. Now throw a single stone into the water. Ripples spread across the surface. The reflection disappears. The mountains never changed, only the water did. The ego works much the same way. A single harsh comment creates emotional ripples. Suddenly, we stop seeing reality clearly. Instead of asking, is there something I can learn? We immediately ask, how do I protect my pride? The Stoics believed that learning begins exactly where pride ends. Epictetus taught that the person who believes they already know everything can never truly grow. Think about how often the ego blocks wisdom. It refuses to apologize because apologizing feels like weakness. It refuses to admit mistakes because mistakes threaten identity. It refuses advice because advice suggests imperfection. Yet every master was once a beginner. Every wise person was once wrong. Every meaningful transformation began with humility. There is another story about a talented sculptor whose work was admired throughout the city. Each year, his statues became more beautiful. A young student finally asked, "How do you create something so extraordinary?" The sculptor smiled. "I don't create greatness. I remove everything that doesn't belong." The student looked confused. "What do you mean?" "The statue already exists inside the stone. My job is simply to remove the excess." Our character develops the same way. The greatest version of ourselves is not created by adding more pride. It is revealed by removing what no longer belongs: arrogance, comparison, vanity, resentment, the endless need to be right. Each piece we remove reveals more freedom beneath. Seneca warned that pride often disguises itself as strength, but true strength requires no audience. Imagine two fires burning side by side. One burns brightly because people constantly feed it with wood. The other burns because its foundation is strong. The first fire dies the moment people stop feeding it. The second continues through the night. The ego depends upon attention. Character depends upon values. One cannot survive without spectators. The other shines, even when nobody is watching. Perhaps that is why so many people feel exhausted today. They are not tired from living. They are tired from performing success, performing confidence, performing importance, constantly wondering what others think, constantly comparing, constantly defending, constantly proving. The Stoics offer another way, a quieter way, a freer way, a life where your value no longer depends on applause, where criticism becomes a teacher instead of an enemy, where success belongs to your actions rather than your image. Over the next chapters, we'll explore why the ego desperately seeks validation, how psychology explains our emotional reactions, and how Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca discovered a freedom that no insult, failure, or criticism could ever take away, because perhaps the greatest victory in life is not becoming more important in the eyes of others. Perhaps it is finally becoming peaceful enough that you no longer need to be. Why does one careless comment stay in your mind for days? Why does someone else's success sometimes make you feel smaller? Why do we feel an overwhelming need to explain ourselves when we are misunderstood? And why is admitting, "I was wrong," often one of the hardest sentences a human being can say? The answer is not simply pride, it is the ego. But before we can silence it, we must first understand it. Many people think the ego is nothing more than arrogance. They imagine loud, boastful people who constantly seek attention. But the ego is far more subtle than that. Sometimes it whispers instead of shouting. It doesn't always say, "I'm better than everyone else." Sometimes it says, "What if I'm not good enough?" It asks, "What will people think of me? Why didn't they appreciate me? Why wasn't I invited? Why did they criticize me? Why does their success make me feel like a failure?" Notice something remarkable. Even insecurity can be driven by the ego, because the ego is obsessed with one thing above all else: the image of yourself. Imagine walking through life carrying an invisible portrait. Every compliment adds a fresh layer of paint. Every criticism scratches the surface. Every rejection tears away another corner. Soon your entire emotional life becomes dedicated to protecting that picture. But here is the problem. The portrait is not you. It is only an idea about you. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology. Epictetus taught that people suffer not because of events themselves, but because of the judgments they attach to those events. A harsh comment is simply a sentence. The ego transforms it into an attack on identity. Someone disagrees with you. The ego hears, they don't respect me. Someone receives recognition. The ego whispers, you're falling behind. Someone corrects your mistake. The ego immediately replies, defend yourself. Modern psychology describes something remarkably similar. It is called ego defensiveness. Whenever our self-image feels threatened, the brain often reacts automatically. We interrupt, we justify, we blame, we argue, we avoid responsibility, not because we are evil, but because the brain is trying to protect the identity we have built. Imagine a castle surrounded by enormous walls. Every time someone approaches, the guards immediately prepare for battle. Eventually, the guards become so suspicious that they attack even friendly visitors. Many egos work the same way. Every disagreement becomes a threat. Every suggestion becomes an insult. Every piece of feedback feels like an attack. Growth becomes impossible because the walls never come down. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of a simple truth. You are not harmed by criticism itself. You are harmed when your ego refuses to examine whether there is truth within it. Imagine looking into a mirror. If the mirror reveals dust on your face, would you smash the mirror? Of course not. You would clean your face. Criticism often functions the same way. Some criticism is unfair, some is inaccurate, some comes from anger, but occasionally it reveals something valuable. Only humility allows us to discover the difference. There is an old story about two blacksmiths working in neighboring villages. One accepted advice from everyone. The other rejected every suggestion. Years passed. The first became a master craftsman. The second remained average. When asked why he had never improved, the second blacksmith answered, "No one was qualified to teach me." His greatest obstacle had never been lack of talent. It had been the arrogance of believing he had nothing left to learn. The ego often fears correction because correction threatens certainty. But wisdom welcomes correction because wisdom values truth more than appearance. Seneca once observed that the greatest obstacle to learning is believing you already possess all the answers. Think about your own life. How many arguments continued simply because neither person wanted to admit they might be wrong? How many friendships quietly ended because pride refused to apologize? How many opportunities disappeared because fear of embarrassment prevented someone from trying? The ego rarely asks, "What is true?" Instead it asks, "How do I avoid looking foolish?" Imagine climbing a mountain. Halfway to the summit, another traveler points toward a safer path. One climber thanks them. The other refuses because changing direction would mean admitting they had chosen poorly. Hours later, one reaches the top safely. The other becomes trapped on dangerous cliffs. The difference was not intelligence. It was humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking less about defending yourself. There is another story about a famous painter whose work attracted visitors from around the world. At every exhibition, he quietly placed a blank notebook beside his paintings. Visitors were invited to write honest feedback. Many praised him. Some criticized him harshly. His students asked, "Why do you read the criticism?" He smiled, "Because compliments tell me what I've done well. Criticism tells me where I can still grow." That answer reflects one of the deepest principles of Stoicism. The goal is not to protect your ego. The goal is to improve your character. Modern psychology also reveals something fascinating. People who possess a stable sense of self are generally less defensive when receiving criticism. Why? Because their identity is not built upon appearing perfect. They understand that making mistakes does not diminish their worth. It simply reveals where learning can begin. Imagine a great oak tree during a storm. The strongest branches bend with the wind. Only the rigid branches break. The same principle applies to the human mind. Flexibility creates resilience. Rigidity creates suffering. The ego mistakes flexibility for weakness. Wisdom recognizes it as strength. There is a profound difference between confidence and ego. Confidence says, I know my strengths, but I still have much to learn. Ego says, I must always appear strong. Confidence admits mistakes. Ego hides them. Confidence celebrates others. Ego compares itself to them. Confidence seeks growth. Ego seeks admiration. Marcus Aurelius understood that every person he met could teach him something, even his critics, even his enemies, because every encounter revealed another opportunity to practice patience, humility, or self-control. Imagine carrying 2 cups. One is already full, the other is empty. Rain begins to fall. Which cup receives more water? Only the empty one. The Stoics believed the mind should remain like the empty cup, open, curious, willing to learn. The ego constantly fills the cup with certainty. Humility empties it again, and that is where wisdom enters. We'll follow Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca through moments of criticism, power, failure, and personal loss to discover how they silenced the ego not by becoming weak, but by becoming so grounded in character that they no longer needed the world to constantly confirm their value, because true freedom begins the moment you stop asking, how do I protect my image? And start asking, how do I become a better human being? Imagine standing at the top of the highest mountain you've ever seen. From that height, cities become tiny. Roads disappear into thin lines. The people below look almost invisible. Suddenly, the things that once seemed so important no longer appear significant at all. The argument you had yesterday, the criticism that kept you awake, the desperate need to prove yourself, the competition that consumed your thoughts. From a higher perspective, they begin to lose their power. This is exactly what the Stoics trained themselves to do. They learned to rise above the constant noise of the ego and view life from a wider perspective. Marcus Aurelius practiced this almost every day. Although history remembers him as one of Rome's greatest emperors, he constantly reminded himself that his title meant very little in the grand story of the universe. He commanded armies. He ruled millions of people. His decisions shaped history. Yet in his private reflections, he repeatedly wrote about the temporary nature of fame. He reminded himself that every emperor before him had eventually become nothing more than a name in history. Some were remembered, many were forgotten. The realization did not make him hopeless. It made him humble. Imagine spending years building a magnificent castle beside the sea. Every tower is carefully shaped, every wall perfectly crafted. Then the tide quietly arrives, without anger, without judgment. The waves simply do what waves have always done. By morning, the castle is gone. Marcus understood that human achievements often resemble those castles. Power fades, beauty changes, reputation disappears, even monuments eventually become dust. If everything external is temporary, why spend your entire life protecting an image that time will erase anyway? Instead, he chose to build something the tides could never wash away: character, justice, wisdom, self-control, compassion. These became the true treasures of his life. There is an old story about a wealthy merchant who spent decades collecting rare jewels. His collection became famous throughout the kingdom. people traveled from distant lands just to admire it. One day, an elderly monk visited his home. After seeing the treasures, the monk smiled and asked, "Which one will you take with you when your journey here is over?" The merchant laughed. "None of them." The monk nodded. "Then perhaps they belong to this world far more than they belong to you." Those simple words changed the merchant forever. He still appreciated beauty. He still cared for his possessions, but he no longer believed they defined him. The Stoics applied this lesson not only to wealth but also to praise, status, and reputation. Epictetus understood this better than most because he experienced life without privilege. Before becoming a philosopher, he lived as a slave. He had no title, no wealth, very few possessions. By society's standards, he appeared powerless. Yet history remembers him as one of the freest men who ever lived. How is that possible? Because he discovered a truth that many powerful people never learn. No one can control your character without your permission. Imagine a man carrying two keys. One key opens every door in his house. The second opens a small box containing his deepest values. Every day he hands strangers the first key. They enter and leave freely. But the second key, he never gives away. That second key represents your inner life, your peace, your integrity, your values. The ego hands that key away far too easily. One insult, one rejection, one moment of embarrassment. Suddenly, someone else controls your emotions. Epictetus refused to surrender that key. He taught that true freedom begins when your inner world is no longer controlled by external events. Imagine a puppet suspended by dozens of strings. Each string represents something outside your control: praise, criticism, money, popularity, success, failure. The more strings attached to you, the easier it becomes for life to pull you in every direction. Now imagine gently cutting those strings one by one, not because you stop caring, but because you stop depending on them. That is what Stoicism offers, not emotional distance, emotional independence. Seneca approached the ego from another angle. He noticed that pride often disguises itself as importance. People become desperate to appear successful, to appear intelligent, to appear admired. Yet the more energy they spend protecting that appearance, the less energy remains for becoming genuinely wise. Imagine carrying an enormous suit of shining armor. Everyone admires how impressive it looks. But after walking only a few miles, the armor becomes unbearably heavy. Eventually, you realize something. The armor that made you look powerful also prevented you from moving freely. The ego often functions like that armor. It protects us from embarrassment. But it also prevents honesty. It protects us from vulnerability. But it also blocks genuine connection. It protects us from admitting mistakes. But it also stops growth. Real strength is lighter. Real strength does not require constant defense. There is another story about a master swordsman who accepted a young student. On the first day of training, the student proudly declared, "I have already mastered everything my previous teachers knew." The master quietly handed him a wooden cup and began pouring tea into it. The cup filled, then overflowed. Tea spilled across the floor. The student quickly interrupted. "The cup is already full." The master smiled. "So is your mind. Nothing more can enter until something leaves." The lesson was unforgettable. The ego fills the mind with certainty. Humility creates space for wisdom. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every time he reflected on his own flaws before judging the faults of others. Instead of asking, "Why are they behaving this way?" he often asked, "Am I doing the same thing in different ways?" That question transformed criticism into self-awareness. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics understood centuries ago. People who regularly practice humility tend to experience stronger relationships, lower levels of chronic stress, and greater emotional resilience. Why? Because humility frees them from the exhausting need to appear perfect. They are no longer terrified of being wrong. They are willing to learn, willing to apologize, willing to change. Imagine standing beneath a vast night sky filled with countless stars. In that moment, your personal victories and disappointments seem much smaller. Not meaningless, simply smaller. This perspective does not reduce your value. It reduces your ego, and once the ego becomes quieter, gratitude grows louder, compassion grows stronger, peace becomes easier to find. In the next, we'll explore inspiring stories of ordinary people who discovered extraordinary freedom not by becoming more important than everyone else, but by letting go of the constant need to prove that they were, because the greatest victory in life is not conquering other people, it is conquering the part of yourself that believes. You must. There is an old saying, the heaviest burden a person can carry is the need to always be right. At first, those words seem strange. After all, isn't being right a good thing? Shouldn't we defend ourselves when others misunderstand us? Shouldn't we protect our reputation? Sometimes, yes. But there is a difference between protecting the truth and protecting the ego. The truth seeks understanding. The ego seeks victory. The truth listens. The ego interrupts. The truth is willing to change. The ego would rather lose peace than lose an argument. Imagine two travelers crossing a mountain together. Both carry backpacks filled with supplies. One backpack contains food, water, and the tools needed for the journey. The other contains something very different: old arguments, unspoken resentments, past insults, broken pride. The second traveler insists on carrying every emotional wound because he believes letting go means losing. Hour after hour, the mountain becomes steeper. Eventually, he collapses from exhaustion, not because the mountain was impossible, but because he insisted on carrying what no longer served him. Many people live exactly this way. They remember every criticism, every betrayal, every embarrassing moment, every person who failed to appreciate them. Years pass, the people involved have moved on. Life has changed, yet the ego continues replaying old conversations as though they happened yesterday. The Stoics understood something remarkable. The event may have happened once, but the ego keeps repeating it. Every painful memory replayed unnecessarily becomes another act of self-inflicted suffering. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that resentment hurts the person holding it more than the person who caused it. Imagine gripping a burning piece of charcoal because you intend to throw it at someone else. Before you ever release it, your own hand begins to burn. Resentment works exactly the same way. The ego says, hold onto this. Wisdom quietly whispers, put it down. There is a story about a respected carpenter named Thomas. For more than 40 years, he built beautiful homes. One afternoon, a wealthy client publicly criticized his work in front of dozens of people. Thomas knew the accusation was unfair. His apprentices waited for him to defend himself. Instead, he calmly thanked the man for sharing his opinion and quietly returned to work. Later, one apprentice asked, "Weren't you angry?" Thomas smiled. "Of course. So why didn't you argue?" The old carpenter picked up a rough piece of wood. "When I carve this wood, I remove what doesn't belong. What would happen if I struck it with my anger? It would splinter." He looked at the young apprentice. "My character deserves the same care." Years later, the apprentice realized that his teacher had won something far greater than the argument. He had protected his peace. The ego often mistakes silence for weakness. The Stoics saw silence as disciplined strength. Epictetus once taught that no one can insult your true character unless you first agree with the insult. Think about that. If someone calls a mountain small, does the mountain become smaller? If someone says the ocean is shallow, does the water disappear? Reality does not change because someone misunderstands it. Neither does your character. Imagine standing before a mirror in a carnival. Some mirrors make you appear taller, others shorter. Some stretch your reflection until it becomes almost unrecognizable. Would you believe those reflections represented the real you? Of course not. Then why believe every distorted opinion offered by someone else? The opinions of others often reveal more about their own experiences than about your identity. Seneca understood this deeply. He believed that wise people welcome honest feedback while refusing to become prisoners of public opinion. That balance is difficult. Many people fall into one of two extremes. Either they ignore all criticism, or they are crushed by every criticism. Wisdom chooses a third path. Listen, reflect, learn, then move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. There is another story about an elderly monk living quietly in the mountains. Travelers often visited him seeking advice. One day, an angry man climbed the mountain determined to provoke him. For nearly an hour, he shouted insults. He questioned the monk's wisdom, mocked his simple lifestyle, laughed at his age. The monk listened peacefully. When the man finally grew tired, he asked, "Why haven't you defended yourself?" The monk smiled gently. "If someone brings you a gift and you choose not to accept it, who keeps the gift? The person who brought it," the man replied. So it is with anger. The traveler stood speechless. The Stoics loved stories like this because they reveal a profound truth. You always have a choice, not over what others bring into your life, but over what you decide to carry. Modern psychology offers similar wisdom. Studies on forgiveness consistently show that people who let go of long-held resentment often experience lower stress, healthier relationships, improved emotional well-being, and greater life satisfaction. Forgiveness does not erase the past. It changes your relationship with it. It says, "This memory will no longer control me." Perhaps that is why Marcus Aurelius spent so little time trying to change other people. He knew how difficult it was to govern even his own thoughts. Imagine trying to steer every ship crossing the ocean. Impossible. Now imagine learning to steer your own. Life suddenly becomes far more manageable. The ego constantly reaches outward, trying to control opinions, outcomes, recognition, respect. The Stoic always returns inward, to discipline, to patience, to wisdom, to integrity, because those things belong entirely to them. There is one final story. A sculptor spent months carving an enormous statue from a single block of marble. When the masterpiece was finished, a visitor asked, "How did you know such beauty was hidden inside the stone?" The sculptor answered, "I simply removed everything that wasn't the statue." The same is true of the human soul. You do not become free by adding more pride. You become free by removing what never belonged. Comparison, vanity, resentment, the need to win every argument, the fear of appearing imperfect. Little by little, the real you begins to appear. We'll bring together everything we've learned through a practical 30-day ego detox challenge, a daily practice inspired by Stoicism that can help you replace pride with humility, comparison with gratitude, and emotional reactivity with lasting inner peace. Because the strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. More often, they are the one who no longer needs to prove they are strong at all. By now, one truth has become impossible to ignore. The ego is not an enemy that disappears after reading a book or watching a single video. It is a lifelong companion. Sometimes it sleeps quietly. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shouts so loudly that it drowns out reason itself. The Stoics understood this. They never believed. The goal was to destroy the ego. The goal was to stop letting it become the leader of your life. Imagine sitting inside a carriage pulled by two horses. One horse represents wisdom, The other represents the ego. The horse of wisdom moves with patience. It observes the road ahead. It conserves its strength. The horse of ego is restless. It wants to race every traveler, react to every noise, prove it is the fastest. If you hand over the reins to the second horse, the journey becomes chaotic. But if wisdom guides the carriage, the ego slowly learns to follow instead of lead. This is the heart of Stoic practice, not eliminating emotion, directing it. Here are 10 daily habits that can gradually replace pride with humility and bring lasting inner freedom. 1. Pause before you react. Most conflicts begin in the tiny space between an event and your response. Someone interrupts you. Someone criticizes your work. Someone disagrees with your opinion. The ego immediately whispers, "Respond now." The Stoics practiced something different. They paused. Even one deep breath can interrupt the ego's automatic reaction. Ask yourself, am I responding to protect the truth or to protect my pride? That single question has prevented countless unnecessary arguments. 2. Practice being wrong. This may sound unusual, but occasionally allow yourself to admit a mistake immediately, without excuses, without defending yourself. Without adding, "but," simply say, "You're right. I made a mistake." Notice what happens. The world does not collapse. Your dignity does not disappear. In fact, people often respect honesty more than perfection. Every sincere admission weakens the ego's grip. 3. Celebrate someone else's success. The ego compares. Character celebrates. Whenever someone around you succeeds, train yourself to respond with genuine encouragement, not because it benefits them alone, because it transforms you. Envy quietly fades whenever gratitude grows. Marcus Aurelius believed another person's excellence should inspire improvement, not insecurity. 4. Spend time in silence every day. The ego thrives in constant noise. It constantly asks, "How do I appear? What do people think? What's next?" Silence interrupts that cycle. Spend 10 or 15 minutes without distractions. No music, no phone, no conversation. Simply observe your thoughts. You'll begin noticing how often the ego seeks attention. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. 5. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. Many people waste enormous amounts of energy trying to make everyone understand them, but not everyone is willing to understand. Some people have already decided what they believe. The ego wants universal approval. Wisdom accepts that this is impossible. As Epictetus reminded his students, your responsibility is to act honorably, not to control every opinion. Sometimes the strongest response is quiet consistency. 6. Remember your mortality. This was one of the most powerful Stoic practices. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself that life is temporary, not to become fearful, but to gain perspective. Ask yourself, will this argument matter 1 year from now? 5 years? 20 years? Often the answer is no. The ego magnifies small moments. Perspective restores proportion. 7. Replace comparison with gratitude. Comparison tells you what you lack. Gratitude reminds you what you already possess. Every morning, write down 3 things you appreciate. They don't need to be extraordinary. A healthy body, a meaningful conversation, the sunrise, a warm meal, a chance to begin again. The ego constantly searches for more. Gratitude teaches contentment. 8. Serve without seeking recognition. Perform 1 act of kindness each day that no one knows about. Help someone anonymously. Offer encouragement without expecting praise. Give without announcing it. The ego asks, will anyone notice? Character quietly replies, that isn't why I did it. This habit slowly shifts your motivation from admiration to integrity. 9. Become curious instead of defensive. When someone disagrees with you, ask 1 simple question before responding. Can you help me understand your perspective? Notice how different that feels. Curiosity opens doors, defensiveness closes them. The Stoics believed every person, even those we disagree with, could teach us patience, humility, or wisdom. 10. End every day with honest reflection. Before going to sleep, ask yourself 3 questions. Where did my ego speak today? Where did wisdom lead instead? How can I respond better tomorrow? Seneca practiced nightly reflection throughout his life. He did not judge himself harshly. He simply observed. Learning replaced guilt. Growth replaced pride. Little by little, he became calmer, wiser, and freer. There is an old story about a young monk who desperately wanted to become enlightened. Every day he asked his teacher, "How much longer? When will I finally become wise?" The teacher never answered. Instead, each morning he handed the student a broom. For years, the young monk swept the monastery courtyard. At first he resented the task. Later he accepted it. Eventually, he stopped thinking about himself altogether. One autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted across the courtyard, the teacher quietly asked, "What changed?" The student smiled. "I no longer sweep to become someone important. I simply sweep because the courtyard needs sweeping." The teacher nodded. "Now your ego has become quiet enough for wisdom to speak." That simple story reveals one of the deepest truths in Stoicism. Freedom is rarely found in extraordinary moments. It is built through ordinary actions repeated with extraordinary awareness. Every time you choose listening over arguing, humility over pride, curiosity over certainty, service over recognition, gratitude over comparison, your ego grows a little quieter, and your character grows a little stronger. One day, someone will criticize you, another person may misunderstand you, someone else may receive the opportunity you hoped for. Years ago, those moments might have controlled your emotions. Now, they become opportunities to practice patience, to strengthen humility, to protect your peace, because every challenge is also a mirror. It reveals who is holding the reins, the ego or wisdom. We'll bring this journey to its emotional conclusion with a powerful 30-day ego detox challenge, a daily practice inspired by Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca that will help you let go of pride, embrace humility, and discover the extraordinary freedom that comes from no longer needing to prove your worth to the world. 4. The quietest person is not always the weakest. Sometimes they are simply the one who has finally learned that true strength never needs to announce itself. Imagine standing before a vast ocean at sunrise. The waves rise, they fall, the wind changes direction, clouds drift across the sky. Yet beneath the surface, the deep ocean remains calm. It does not fight every wave. It does not argue with every storm. It simply remains what it is. The Stoics believed your mind could become like that ocean, not because life would stop testing you, but because your peace would no longer depend on every opinion, every insult, or every victory. Throughout this journey, we've uncovered a simple but life-changing truth. The greatest prison is not created by other people. It is created by the ego that constantly whispers, "Prove yourself, win the argument, be admired." Never let them think you're weak. For years, many of us obey that voice without realizing it. We chase recognition, we defend every mistake, we compare ourselves to strangers, we replay old arguments, we crave approval, we fear criticism, and little by little, we become exhausted. Not because life is too heavy, but because the ego insists on carrying burdens that were never ours to hold. Marcus Aurelius understood this. Although he ruled an empire, he reminded himself every day that titles, wealth, praise, and reputation would eventually disappear. What remained was character. Epictetus owned almost nothing, yet discovered a freedom that emperors often lacked. No one could force him to surrender his integrity. Seneca experienced privilege, exile, success, and uncertainty. Through every season of life, he returned to the same lesson. A peaceful mind is worth more than public admiration. Take a moment and reflect on your own life. How many sleepless nights have been caused by worrying about what someone else thought of you? How many friendships have been damaged because neither person wanted to admit they were wrong? How much energy has been spent trying to appear successful instead of becoming truly wise? Now imagine living differently. Imagine walking into every conversation with nothing to prove. Imagine hearing criticism without becoming defensive. Imagine celebrating another person's success without comparing it to your own. Imagine apologizing without feeling diminished. Imagine choosing peace instead of pride. That is not weakness, that is mastery. There is an old story about an aging gardener who spent decades caring for a magnificent garden. Visitors constantly praised the flowers. They admired the trees. They complimented the beauty of the landscape. One young visitor asked, "Which flower are you most proud of?" The old gardener smiled and pointed toward an empty patch of soil. There, the visitor looked confused. "There is nothing growing there." "Exactly," the gardener replied. "That is where I removed the weeds." The young man remained silent. The gardener continued, "Most people think beauty comes from adding more, but often it comes from removing what no longer belongs." Life is much the same. Peace rarely arrives because you gain more recognition. Freedom rarely arrives because everyone finally understands you. Happiness rarely arrives because you win every argument. Instead, peace grows when you remove what was never meant to stay: comparison, pride, vanity, the need to impress, the fear of appearing imperfect, the constant hunger for approval. Little by little, the noise fades, and beneath it, you discover something extraordinary. The person you were before the ego convinced you that you had to prove your worth. Now I'd like to invite you to begin a 30-day ego detox challenge every morning, before checking your phone, before reading messages, before entering the noise of the day. Ask yourself one simple question: how can I become a better person today, not a more impressive one? Carry that question with you throughout the day. When someone disagrees with you, pause. When someone criticizes you, listen before reacting. When someone succeeds, celebrate them sincerely. When you make a mistake, own it with humility. Each evening, spend 5 quiet minutes reflecting on these 3 questions. Where did my ego try to control me today? Where did I choose wisdom instead of pride? What can I let go of before tomorrow begins? These questions may seem simple, but repeated every day, they reshape the way you see yourself and the world. One day, you'll notice that criticism no longer ruins your afternoon. Another day, you'll realize you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to everyone. Then one morning, you'll wake up and discover something remarkable. The voice of your ego has become quieter, and the voice of your character has become stronger. That is the freedom the Stoics spoke about. Not freedom from challenges, freedom from unnecessary suffering. If this story has encouraged you, I'd love to hear from you. What is one habit of the ego you're choosing to leave behind today? Share your answer in the comments below. Your words might become the encouragement someone else needs to begin their own journey toward humility and inner peace. And if you're passionate about Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, psychology, self-mastery, and timeless life lessons, be sure to like, subscribe, and join this growing community. Each week, we explore practical wisdom that helps you build emotional resilience, quiet confidence, and lasting inner peace. Before you leave, remember this: the tallest mountain never tells the valley how high it is. The deepest river never announces its depth. The brightest stars make no sound. Nature teaches us a profound lesson. Everything truly powerful is quietly confident. So let your actions speak louder than your pride. Let your character become stronger than your image. Let your wisdom become greater than your need to be right. And never forget, the day you silence your ego is the day you begin to hear your true self. Walk gently, live honestly, choose humility, and you'll discover a freedom that no applause can give and no criticism can ever take away.